Hello learners, today we will be discussing about the historic trade routes which is part of the module Maritime and Trade Route Tourism. As international trade has existed since a long period of time, so we have to understand the various routes which were taken to facilitate this trade and the kind of archaeological material that we recover from these various trading centers and the routes which was followed. So, after this lecture, students will be learning details about the different trade routes of ancient and medieval India. Students will also learn the various commodities that were traded and the chronological context of the same. And in addition, they will be learning the nuances of the river network for trading and also about the famous silk route and its importance in trade. Finally, they shall also grasp over the spice route, which was present during the ancient and the medieval time, and learn a comparative analysis of all the different routes which existed. India and South Asia have long lain at the crossroads of Eurasian commerce. From the Bronze Age onward, we have complex networks of roads, rivers, and sea lanes linking the subcontinent to Central Asia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Maritime trade was initiated by the Indus Valley Civilization, and after the decline of IVC during 6th century BCE, again evidence of maritime contact can be found. Um, Early medieval period also witnessed a strong naval power, and in the early historic period, Indo-Roman trade was at its prime height. So the maritime trade under the Mauryas is very well documented in the Arthashastra by Kautilya, which guidelines regarding the appointment of superintendent of shipping, port commissioner, superintendent of commerce, superintendent of tolls, etc. Arthashastra also details construction and security of trade routes, state officials which had to look after the seamless trade, and which also involved punishing anyone which are found to violate the trade rules and regulations. Megasthenes confirmed the shipbuilding industry which was present, as well as the state controlling and administering the shipbuilding industry. Kautilya elucidates how the sea and the river routes were cheaper than the land routes. During in the post-Mauryan period, we have the Indo-Roman trade, which was at its extent height. We have the archaeological evidences of the amphorae, which speaks about high level maritime trade which existed during that time period, which had an impact over southern India. New ports, new cities also emerged. Sea trade was carried on both by Indian and foreign merchants. Trade traveled across the Red Sea. Exchange of ideas took place, and both the western and the eastern coast engaged in trade. When it comes to the trade routes, in case of the internal trade routes, Sanskrit texts and archaeological studies identify the Uttar Path, literally the northern road running from Gandhar and Taxila east through the Ganges Valley, and the Dakshin Path, that is the southern road through central India to the Tamil coast. These arteries brought together distant regions and carried a broad range of goods. As one study notes, commodities such as silk, spices, and metals were exchanged between India and Central Asia and China along the Uttar Path during the classical period. Likewise, the Dakshin Path connected Tamil lands with Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, and the Arabian world, enabling exports of black pepper, cotton, ivory, and other spices highly prized abroad. As you can see, this is a map which shows the routes Uttar Path and Dakshin Path and the various centers that these routes connected, and as well as the centers which over which these routes flowed. So basically, they were all centers of archaeological interest because they were all centers of goods which were exchanged, therefore giving us important precious information in order to reconstruct the trading routes existed. So, in detail, Uttarapath was a major trans-regional trade routes of North India, which stretched from the northwest across the Indo-Gangetic plains up to the port of Tamralipti on the Bay of Bengal. The Ashtadhyay mentions the various kingdoms that were located along it. Details of the routes can be worked out on the basis of references in the Vinaya Pitak and the Jatakas. The Uttarpath had a northern and a southern sector. The northern sector ran through Lahore, Jalandhar, Saharanpur, along the Gangetic plains to Bijnor, and then through Gorakhpur towards Bihar and Bengal, and the southern sector connected Lahore, Bhatinda, Delhi, Hastinapur, Kanpur, Lucknow, Varanasi, and Allahabad, and then moved on towards Patliputra and Rajgriha. There were many feeder routes which were connected to the main artery of Uttarapath, and the Uttarapath was a land come river route. Buddhist texts refer to the riverine movement of trades and goods along the Ganga. The distribution of many ancient cities along this river and its tributaries, especially the Yamuna, Ghagra, and the Sarayu, suggests that rivers formed major communication routes. The Dakshin Path is also mentioned in the Arthashastra, what was operational from the early historic period. It stretched from Patliputra in Magad to Paitan, and was also connected to ports on the western coast. Although there are several references to the Trans-Vindhyan regions in the Buddhist texts and more so in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, Buddhist texts refer to the merchants traveling from Patliputra and Kaushambi to Pratishthan. The Sutta Nipath tells the story of Bavari, a teacher from Koshal who built a hermitage on the banks of the Godavari in Asak and sent his disciples on a mission to meet the Buddha. They traveled through Pratishthan, Ujjaini, Vidisha, and on to Shravasti. So, this particular story gives you an idea that such routes existed which were being used for trading and for other purposes. Vindhyas provided the iron, copper, and various types of stone to the settlements in the Ganga Valley, and these raw materials must have moved along the north sector of the Dakshin Path. Trade and interaction along this route increased in the subsequent centuries. So these particular tables speaks about the various centers that Uttar Path connected and the various centers with Dakshin Path connected. As you can see, Uttar Path connected Shravasti to Takshila via Shravasti, Saket, Prayag, Kanyakuj, Sore, Hastinapur, Sakal, Patliputra, Takshila, Kosal, Varanasi, and Rajgriha, and Dakshina Path connected Adag, Pratishthan, Mahishmati, Ujjain, Gonand, Vidisha, Kaushambi, Saket, and finally Kosal. The rivers and the Indo-Gangetic trade network also functioned as an interesting sector when it came to facilitating trade. And on the opposite coast, the Ganges-Brahmaputra system and its tributaries also connected northern plains to the Bay of Bengal. And the ancient port of Tamralipta formed the outlet for Ganges trade, while inland ports like Patliputra funneled goods downriver. Through these river networks, bulky staples and regional specialities, example salt, timber, lark, moved to coastal markets, which were then fed into the maritime routes for export. As Tripathi emphasizes, Harappan trade fanned out overland towards Central Asia and along coastal routes to the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, and Bay of Bengal, underscoring how rivers and ports spread commerce. In short, India's major rivers served as commercial highways linking the fertile Indo-Gangetic plain and Indus Valley to overseas connections. Now, when it comes to the external trade routes, the external trade routes were joined by the internal trade routes. Overland routes connecting Taxila with North Afghanistan and Iran were important for obtaining raw materials such as silver, gold, lapis lazuli, and jade. There may have been a long distance trade in fine wood between India and Mesopotamia. The Central Asian route had been important from Neolithic times onward. The route via the Bolan Pass and through North Afghanistan was also important. Cities such as Takshila and Charada were in international trade centers and established commercial relation between India and the Western world. The routes into India from the northwest were also followed not only by traders but also by invading Persian and Macedonian armies as well as the Central Asian tribes. The route from Bengal to Myanmar was important also for import of jade. Sea travel and trade are also mentioned in the Pali Canon. The Jatakas contain many accounts of sea voyages. Maritime trade with Southeast Asia also began in the early historic period. It was no doubt because of the economic influence of traders that Buddhist texts describe Vanijya as one of the highest occupations. When it comes to the Silk Route, now we'll be talking about the overland Eurasian routes. Centuries before the European colonial times, India was tied to the Great Silk Route system, which stretched from China to the Mediterranean Sea. Caravans from South Asia crossed the Hindu Kush and the Pamis via the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Pass into Central Asia, eventually reaching Persia and beyond. Chinese sources, classical historians, and modern historians will attest that this northern corridor linked Taxila with the Gangetic Plains to Herat, Bactria, and even the Caspian. Along the Silk Route, various spices were traded, textiles were traded, luxuries were traded, Chinese silk, horses, and precious metals were traded. Sanskrit writings call Uttar Pad the Northern Road and note that it passed silk from China as well as Indian spices and metals. Archaeological finds also corroborate this, that the late Harappan merchants exported measured quantities of lapis lazuli and carnelian beads as well as copper ingots into Central Asian markets. In sum, the Silk Roads were bidirectional and Indian exports of spices, beads, cotton flowed west and north, while imports like silk and horses arrived eastward. So now we'll be speaking about the various routes of Silk Road. So the overland route, Silk Road consisted of three dominating routes in the overland routes. There is a northern route, the southern route, and the southwestern route. In the northern route, the easternmost part of the northern route was Chang'an, an important city in central China, and it was capital for more than 10 different centuries, and the northern route became popular around the 1st century BCE. From Chang'an, the northern route went northwest through the Chinese provinces Shaanxi and Gansu Gansu before splitting into three different routes. So, what are these three different routes? The first route followed the mountain ranges north of the Taklamakan Desert, which is currently in China. The second route followed the mountain ranges south of the Taklamakan Desert, and the third route went north of the Tian Shan Mountains through Turpan, Talgar, and Almaty in what is now southeast Kazakhstan. One branch of the north route also turned off to the northwest instead of continuing westwards. This one passed the Aral Sea and went north of the Caspian Sea before reaching the Black Sea. The southern route went from China through the Karakoram Mountains. Because of this, it was also known as the Karakoram route. The Karakoram mountain range spans the borders of Pakistan, India, and China, and also extends into Afghanistan and Tajikistan in the northwest. West of the Karakoram Mountains, the southern route had many spurs heading south to the sea, since many travelers wished to continue by ship instead of going overland. From Merv, the southern route went westward in almost a straight line through northern Iran, Mesopotamia, and the northern outskirts of the Syrian desert to reach the Levant, where ships were waiting to take the precious cargo across the Mediterranean to southern Europe. There was also a branch of Silk Road which went from Herat in Afghanistan to the ancient port town of Charax, Spaniso, by the Persian Gulf, passing through Susa on the way. Now, the southwestern route of the Silk Road went through China, from China to India through the Ganges Delta, and the Delta region was an important trading hub, and archaeological excavation have found astonishing array of goods from various parts of the world, such as ancient Roman beads and gemstones from Thailand and Java in Indonesia. Now, the Silk Road also had parts of maritime trade involved, and the maritime waters which was part of the Silk Road are the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, Indian Ocean, Gulf of Bengal, Arabian Sea, Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. India's link with silk trade routes. There are four corridors which link India with the ancient Silk Road. The road through high Tibetan plateau and down to the Ganges to Shravasti, the road through valleys and mountains of western Nepal to the fertile valleys of the Ganges, the Silk Road through Karakoram via Srinagar, Leh, and Sangju Pass covering western Himalayas, and the road down the Ganges, Delhi to Chandraketugarh in West Bengal. The maritime spice was also an interesting part of this trade because Indian spices were very famous, and even now it is famous worldwide. By the early Common Era, Indians had mastered the monsoon winds and sailed across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. From the Malabar and the Coromandel coast, we see merchant fleets carrying spices and other goods to distant lands, making India a centerpiece of the spice route. For instance, 1st century CE Greek accounts, Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, catalogue India's major sea exports like spices, medicinal and aromatic plants, gems, cotton and silk, dyes, grain, rice, sesame oil, clarified butter, that is ghee, ivory, pearls, and tortoise shell. This list highlights the extraordinary diversity of the various products that were being traded at that point of time. The key ports as are Muziris, Kaviripattanam, and they were the leading ports. Literary sources describe Tamil ports as vibrant entrepôts. Archaeological and inscriptional evidence also show how these ports handled this vast amount of traffic. And ports of Muchiris and Kaviripattanam, as noted in one of the research papers, played a crucial role in trading spices, cloth, and other goods. In particular, Kaviripattanam acted as India's gateway to the Roman Empire. For example, the southern port of Pulhar specialized in black pepper and ivory, and pilgrims like Fahian record Tamil merchants packing baskets of pepper for the long haul north. Likewise, we have the Coromandel and the Bengal ports as well, which linked the Bay of Bengal route to Southeast Asia, which is famous for muslin textiles, funneled its cotton cloth and rice via Tamralipti, which in turn was connected by sea to Burma, Java, and Sri Lanka. On India's west coast, Gujarat ports Barigaza or Bharuch, for example, and the island port of Socotra bridged trade with Arabia and East Africa. In the medieval era, as Muslim and late European traders entered the Indian Ocean, these South Asian routes only intensified. Gujarat became a nexus for pepper, indigo, and cloth exports, while Bengal cloth and jutes found broad markets. Throughout, spices like pepper, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, clove, nutmeg, cotton, textiles, metals, and luxury items drove the commerce. The major commodities traded over the centuries are wide, consistent, and remarkably sought after. The Periplus enumerates the various kind of spices which were traded, especially black pepper, which originates in Kerala, and cinnamon and cassia from Sri Lanka. Ginger and later nutmeg and cloves via Southeast Asia also commanded high prices. Cotton textiles were India's hallmark export. Indian muslins and calicos were famed throughout Asia, Africa, and Europe. And even the Buddhist cave paintings mention Indian cotton cloth with poetic reverence. Silk was also traded, although China supplied most raw silk. India's wealth in pearls, precious stones, and gemstones made it a center of the gem trade. One of the research papers notes Harappan shipments of lapis, carnelian, and copper ingots into Central Asia, and the Periplus likewise lists Indian gems among exports. Dyes were also important too, like indigo, turmeric, and madder from India colored fabrics across the world. Agricultural staples also traveled in bulks, like the Indian rice and the wheat reached to neighboring regions. Sesame oil, ghee, and spices of the mustard family were exported in large quantities. Other products included timber, specialty woods, elephants, and ivory for elite markets, and coir and bamboo goods for the local needs. Animal products like ivory and tortoise shell were also prized luxuries, and in return, India imported horses from Arabia and Central Asia, gold and silver bullion, and variety of foreign luxury goods like the Chinese silk, the Persian handicrafts, and the African gold. This is an interesting map which shows the Silk Route, the internal Indian routes, and the maritime routes. Please note that the maritime routes are also part of the Silk Route, like showing the various ocean and the seas which were part of this bustling trade across China and India. And trade in the medieval period also continued and growth. The South Indian kingdoms of Chols and the Pallavas actively traded with Southeast Asia, exporting tropical spices and textiles and importing exotic forest goods and metals. In fact, by the 15th century CE, India supplied most of Europe's pepper and a large share of imported cloth. Muslim geographers and travelers note that Indian ships supplied the Red Sea and Persian Gulf, while Gujarat and Malabar merchant guilds dominated trade. Maritime trade were essential to the Indian economy and carried goods from Bharuch, Tamralipti, and Muziris to Africa, Arabian Peninsula, and the Southeast Asia. This is an interesting map which shows how the Chol Empire expanded and their influence and the maritime trade routes adopted by them to trade across Southeast Asia. This is another table which shows the Silk Route and the region connected by these primary routes and the commodities traded. Kindly note that Silk Road, Indian Ocean maritime routes, Uttar Pad, Dakshin Pad, the riverine Indo-Gangetic route, and Tamil Nadu and North-South Central routes have also been mentioned, and the regions that were connected by them, as well as the principal commodities that were traded. These are few references that you can go to understand more about the trading route networks which existed, and the Silk Route was and is a very interesting center of archaeological research when it comes to understanding the various kind of goods that were traded and the volume and the amount of trade which took place across regions. Thank you.